Chapter 239, each having their own gathering. Well, I don't need it anymore, but I can give it to Susie, and I can exchange it for other Beyonder ingredients. Well, Susie's potion is still short of the spinal fluid from a Farsman rabbit. Some things are easier left to Susie, it's far more convenient for her than for me. Every famous detective needs a good assistant. Aha. Audrey quickly made her decision. To her, this was no longer something she particularly cared about. As she put down the telegram, her pleasure subsided, and the worries of reality began to emerge. I still owe Mr. Fool intelligence regarding the secret order, the mission to assassinate the Inti's ambassador, and a request from his blessed. I've finally experienced the feeling of being riddled in debt. Audrey, we can't delay any longer. Let's start. The girl quietly clenched her fists. She wanted to find a pen and paper and write a letter to Viscount Glaint so that he could arrange for her to meet Zio and Fors as soon as possible. She needed to delegate the mission. She picked up a fountain pen, dipped it in ink, and suddenly, Audrey held her wrist in midair without writing. She had just thought of a crucial problem, which was that she knew very little about the Inti's ambassador Backerland. In such cases, it was easy to misjudge the difficulty of a mission, either because no one was willing to accept it or because the mission had been entrusted to an unsuitable person, dooming the mission to fail at the very beginning. The resulting growing cost wasn't her main concern. Instead, she believed that the fool would better reward her and help her even further. After pondering for a moment, Audrey turned her head to her maidservant, Annie, and said, "Tell Countess Jeria that I accept her invitation and will punctually attend her ball tomorrow evening." Jeria was the wife of Earl Wolf, and she had invited ambassadors to loan from every country to her upcoming ball, including Backerland Jean Madden. Audrey had planned on declining the invitation with the excuse of being sick, but now she was interested in the ball. After she observed Ambassador Backerland and gathered enough information, she would meet with Zio and Fors. Audrey suddenly felt the excitement of participating in a major event that she always dreamed of. First manor in the Rorsted Archipelago, city of generosity, Bayam. Having returned to the real world, Alger Wilson changed into attire that was considered gaudy in the Inti's Republic and went through the back door of the hotel into the alley and made several detours. He stopped in front of a house with no garden or lawn and put on a familiar white mask. Next, he knocked on the door with 3 heavy knocks and 2 light ones, separating them with 2 lengthy pauses and 2 short pauses respectively. After about 10 seconds, the door creaked open. A man wearing a pirate's headband stuck his head out and looked around quickly. "Come in," the man said with a deep voice as he made way. Without a word, Alger quietly walked into the room. Creak. The door slammed shut. At 15 Minsk Street, Klein drew the curtains open and sat down at his desk. The information about the secret order that was given to him by the hanged man made him realize that his target might have certain connections to the Inti's Republic. At the same time, he was reminded of the words the hanged man had used to describe the Antigonus family: strange and terrifying. The Beyonder who sneaked into my room last night to read the information and leave me a warning was indeed strange. The sequence pathway that the Antigonus family has in their control is the seer pathway which the secret order possesses. The two can be equated. That is to say, one can speculate that the Beyonder from last night was a member of the secret order who works part-time as an Inti's Republic spy. Or could the person not be a member of the secret order, but someone who used the connection between the Inti's Republic and the secret order to obtain the corresponding formulas and potions? Klein began to boldly assume that as he carefully tried to verify. This can explain why my clown's premonition ability didn't trigger when the strange threadworm intruded. This is the suppression effect of a Beyonder from a higher sequence that shares the same pathway as me. Of course, it's also possible that the iron-black threadworm posed no concrete threat to me. Similarly, it can be explained why the threadworm infiltrated my room the same night that I wrote the information regarding Ian Wright. Furthermore, it went straight for the desk. The other party is equipped with seer abilities, making matters appear reasonably logical. After repeatedly verifying his speculation, Klein felt that his guess was very likely close to the truth. If the person in question is a relatively higher sequence beyonder from the seer pathway, what sequence number would he be? And what would the potion name be? To have the threadworm in his control, could it be another component of a circus, the beast tamer? Klein shook his head in a self-deprecating manner while feeling amused. Perhaps my subsequent potion formula will be obtained from him. Is this the true meaning of the revelation I received from my former divination? Backland really is the land of hope. Klein muttered a few words to himself and began to consider what to do next. He had entrusted the task of assassinating the Inti's ambassador Backerland to put an end to all latent dangers. He had to avoid suspicion, but he didn't have the ability needed to do so. After Ian Wright's whereabouts were revealed to both sides, he was confident that Ambassador Backerland wouldn't have time to exact revenge on him in the near future and wouldn't add to his problems. Finding the extremely important item he mentioned was obviously what he was most concerned about. In other words, before that item is found, I will be safe. I won't need to rush to hire powerful, beyonder bodyguards. Even if there's any follow-up revenge, it's unlikely the ambassador will hire a high-sequence beyonder to deal with me. It's neither economical nor necessary. After all, Backland isn't his home ground. The highest possibility is that he would still get the beyonder who sent the iron-black threadworm to infiltrate my room last night. He would at least be at sequence 7, and perhaps even sequence 6 or 5. He has the strength required and is familiar with the situation. When the time comes, I just need to hire a bodyguard according to this standard. I hope that before then, the ambassador will never be able to issue such an order. Klein looked out of the window at the fog which had finally dissipated, seemingly in a daze. He decided to continue heading to Braveheart's bar tonight. Firstly, this was to come into contact with other Beyonders through Kaspar's so as to choose a suitable bodyguard. Secondly, he could find an opportunity to sell Merceau's Beyonder characteristic, gather some funds, and see if anyone was selling any powerful mystic items to enhance his strength. This was a plan that would never go out of date. After confirming his plan, Klein pretended to leisurely read the newspaper. He waited until the sky turned dark before slowly getting up and making himself tomato oxtail soup. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he drew the bedroom curtains as usual and decided not to open them tonight. Then, summoning himself and responding to himself, he turned into the unique spirit body, bringing back Azek's copper whistle, Merceau's Beyonder characteristic, the self-made charms, all sorts of materials, and the tarot cards to the real world, leaving behind only a few items, such as the bloodied contract. After doing all of this and equipping the corresponding items, Klein's strength returned to its peak, and he was once again half an expert in mysticism. He straightened his collar, took his hat and cane, and left 15 Minsk Street. Iron Gate Street, inside Braveheart's bar. In exchange for a glass of beer, Klein found Kaspar's in a card room, playing Fighting Evil while betting on a boxer outside. He was leading quite a pleasant life. The familiar surroundings reminded Klein of the last time he had met Merrick playing poker with more than 10 zombies. He was suddenly glad that he hadn't brought Azek's copper whistle with him. If I carried the copper whistle that Mr. Azek had given me, I think that a dozen or so of Merrick's zombies would mutiny on the spot and come to entertain me warmly. I wonder what kind of expression he would have. Klein stood by the door, nodding at Kaspar's Kalinin to indicate his intentions. Kaspar's covered his cards and swore. He got up, walked to the door, and said in a low voice, "I'll take you to a place where the people, although they aren't as good as Merrick, are pretty strong. As for whether or not you can make a deal, it has nothing to do with me. However, I have to warn you in advance you are not to anger them, or you might not be able to see the sun tomorrow. Of course, it's not easy to see the sun in Backland after September." "Do I need to pay you?" Klein asked sincerely. Kaspar's nodded, pleased. £2. I can buy a revolver with that money at a weapons store. Although they set the price at more than £3, it can basically be haggled for around £2. Klein grumbled and gave Kaspar's 2 £1 notes. Kaspar's turned his head to his fellow players to inform them that he was leaving. Hobbling along, he led Klein towards the bar's kitchen, and from there, entered the back alley and circled around a darkened house. He took out an iron mask that could only cover half a face, handed it to Klein, and chuckled. Just pretend that you bought this for £2. I can buy a lot more with £2. Klein wore the iron mask and deliberately messed up his hair. Seeing that he was ready, Kaspars knocked on the door rhythmically. 7 or 8 seconds later, a small wooden board on the door was suddenly pulled open, revealing a pair of brown eyes behind it. After a long moment of scrutiny, Klein finally saw the door open behind him. A man wearing an iron mask stood there and handed Klein a hooded robe. He said to Kaspars in a hoarse voice, "Next time, remember to tell me in advance. Otherwise, HMPH." He closed the door, turned, and led Klein through the darkened living room into the activity room on the first floor. There was a candle burning on the coffee table, and the room was dimly lit. There were about 10 people sitting on the sofas and chairs around the coffee table. They were all wearing hooded robes and wearing iron masks. After putting on the long robe, Klein quietly found a chair in a corner and sat down. He heard a fat-faced man complain. "Recently, there has been a group of wild beasts in the sewers that have gnawed away a lot of the herbs I grew. They're very smart and didn't even touch the poisonous ones. I need someone to help me clean them up. You know, this isn't my specialty. I'm only good at concocting medicine and treating your illnesses."